the problem is the party system. Now, George Washington, President George Washington, and others at the founding of our republic as an independent republic tried to prevent the formation of a party system. And I think the time has come to eliminate the party system. At this time, it's the only way, formally, through the legal process, that we could eliminate the possibility of these two kinds of presidents. What's wrong? Why should we have party systems? We have a constitution, which is defined. The constitution is fine if it's carried through as intended. It is our system. But why do we have to have parties intervening in between the process of selecting presidential leadership and national government? Why do we do that? What screwball invented this kind of nonsense? Because that's what happened. People become partisan and say, which party wins is going to determine the fate of the nation. But no party has that kind of right. There cannot be a party that has the right to oversee and control the destiny of the nation. You can have a president, there's nothing wrong with that. But you can't have the president as the president of a party. Or you cannot have a conniving between two presidential teams or two party teams, which connive by special agreement among themselves to create the composition of national government. These things are obscenities which leaders of our nation, beginning from the George Washington administration, recognized as evils. And the idea of going to a European kind of government, which is inherently corrupt by its very nature, not necessarily by the intention of the people or the intention of the politicians. They just don't know any better. The only solution, and the only way this can be done, is if we infect the population with the realization we do not want a party system. We have state governments, don't we, under our Constitution. We have local governments within state governments under our Constitution. We have bodies which the nation creates to perform functions of the federal government, the military and the rest of it. So we don't need parties. They don't do any damn good. I mean, it's like Franklin Roosevelt. If Franklin Roosevelt had just been the president, didn't have to deal with these damn parties, we wouldn't have the mess we got into. What we need is, we need to have not a contention over which party is going to win, when the party was not inherent in the conception of our nation. What we need is a federal republic with its state composition and other local compositions playing their role. We don't need this party system, which is a system inherently of corruption. What we need is the election, due process election of a composition of government. And we don't want people diverting the attention of the population from the issues of the nation over the issues of partisanship. That's where the problem lies. When you rely on parties as such, you set up a kind of controversy or competition for power between or among party systems. These party systems don't excite the passions of the foolish voters, who now are concerned about the party, voting for the party first and the nation second, when it must be the nation first and not the party. The voluntary part of the citizen, fine, that's fine. The citizen has a right to make formations, to make agreements among themselves, and to cast their votes accordingly, and to discuss these matters accordingly. But we don't want the top-down rule of a party system, which is controlled by the money sent to them, by financial interests which control the money which gives one party advantage over the other. You want the bare citizen, as a citizen, to have an equal right and independence of this party system. This has been said again and again in the course of the history of the United States. That people with insight realize the essence of the corruption in the United States is based and derived from the use of the party system. And you see it right now. You have, the nation is now mortgaged for the selection of its government, its national government, is mortgaged to the party system. Everything is stopped except which party is going to win. And one is almost as bad as the other. And why should we be spending our time selecting a government of two parties, neither of which is fit to be our government? Why don't we have a national government selected in the way that George Washington, for example, President George Washington had intended? We would not have that mess. And the citizen would be called upon not to decide whose butt he wants to kiss, but rather what the issues are and programs that this citizen wishes to express. We want to engage the citizen in the dialogue. We don't want to take the vote between, the competition between groups of citizens. We want the citizen to force the reality that he or she is voting for the government. And what the citizens do in voting for a government will determine the fate of the nation. We want to confront the citizen with the responsibility of his being accountable, or her being accountable for the responsibility of what government is and what it becomes. We have to force responsibility upon the individual citizen, as a citizen, not as a sucker playing into some kind of game. And this has been understood for a long time by the best thinkers of the United States, that it is the party system, as typified by the Andrew Jackson presidency, one of the most corrupt presidencies in our history. And the corruption that was done to the United States by the election of Andrew Jackson and the people who controlled him, which are British bankers. So Andrew Jackson was a tool of British imperial bankers. They owned him. They ran him. And it was because of the party system that this could happen. And we've got the same thing today. You're shacked up with a couple of clowns, Dummo and the crook, and the insane crook. Now, the only thing we can do, or the only thing I can do on this thing right now, apart from telling you about this wonderful information, is to awaken you to realize what we're really up against. To recognize what the real problems are. If you're thinking about looking at this mess out there from the standpoint of Democratic or Republican, you're not thinking. Because you're not thinking in terms of the essential interest. Because what you're doing, whatever you do, you are imprisoned to pledging your support to a party. Not to the nation. Yes, you say to the nation, but it's the party that controls you. And that is how Andrew Jackson destroyed the United States, was with the party system. That's what doomed Franklin Roosevelt. Franklin Roosevelt would never have had this clown, Truman, stuck on him, except for the party system business. And that's where our problem lies. And we have to make that clear, because we know what the state of mind is. What's the state of mind of the voter? He's playing football, not politics. He's playing a version of football, baseball, whatever, gambling, racketeering, whatever. And his mind, his passion is associated with winning this for this party, this team, this, that, so forth. Not for the nation. The objective of our system of government must be to force the citizen, as a citizen, to think through what the national interest is. And we don't do it. We say, which party are you going to support? Well, what's the party going to do? Well, I think it's a good party. In other words, they don't know what the hell they're doing. And their passion is involved in being sure they won't do it. And that's where we stand. And that's the thing we got to think about. And you've got to destroy the self-confidence of those damn fools who think that the party vote, the vote for the party, should determine the decision of the nation. That is a false and fraudulent conception. And it's about time we called a halt to it. And right now would be a very good time. Right. Right. Now, what are we going to do? Let's lay out, we have our organization. We have a conception of how to organize this nation. How to deal with the great crisis, the financial crisis, the economic crises which occur in this nation. And which occur also similarly in other nations, which I think would be tend at this time to look with a friendly eye at what I might propose here right now. All right. First of all, the world is bankrupt. The transatlantic region is totally, hopelessly bankrupt. Every part of Western and Central Europe is totally bankrupt. It's incurably bankrupt under its present system. Nothing can be done to save it in its present form. There's no way you can bail it out. There's no way you can take it out of this except one way: Glass-Steagall. Now, of late, you will observe that Glass-Steagall has become increasingly popular in England, in the continent of Europe, and other notable places. So what does Glass-Steagall do? Well, essentially it says that the system of government we're running under right now is hopelessly corrupt. So let's shut it down. Let's shut down all the bailout. We're not going to pay it. We just ain't going to pay it. So what are we going to do? Well, we're going to have a grand old time. We're going to go to a straight credit system, which is Glass-Steagall, immediately. Now that means that all those other guys, the gamblers, the Wall Street types and so forth, are going to find themselves sitting, well, they have all these claims, all these values. They own all this property in terms of title. But we say the point here is with Glass-Steagall that you can run your kind of banking system if you want to, under penalties of law, of course. But you don't have any right to come to the federal government to demand that the federal government bail them out if they happen to go bankrupt. Now, I can tell you, as you probably have suspected, that practically every part of the whole system of the United States today is already hopelessly, incurably bankrupt. And there's only one way we can escape from this bankruptcy. You want to have some money to live on? There's one thing you've got to do. Glass-Steagall. And that will open the gate. It won't solve the problem, but it will open the gates to permit the problem to be solved. If you take and say all these things that don't conform to Glass-Steagall, all these things must be canceled. That means these banks can still have their banking system as long as they don't go bankrupt. We're not going to shut them down arbitrarily. We're just going to we're letting them out on their own and saying this is not our business. The federal government is not responsible for this. All right, now that will reduce the debt of the United States tremendously. It would have a similar effect in nations of Europe. The French banks would not be pleased with me. They would probably say some very nasty things about me, but things like that. But the point is the world now knows, and increasingly in Europe, and starting in England and other countries in Europe itself, there's an understanding that Glass-Steagall is a necessary alternative. And these guys are having a terrible time in fighting off the Glass-Steagall popularity. But that will do it. The problem is, because we waited so long since we canceled Glass-Steagall, we waited too long. And they ran up a hyperinflationary debt, which is really beyond even dreaming. So therefore, the result is that we have if we go Glass-Steagall, we're going to have relatively little money under our federal system because we wasted it by throwing it into the garbage pail, and we can't get it back. So therefore, we're going to have to go to another measure. Now, I said national banking. Now, why national banking? Because unless you create a banking system under the U.S. government, under protection and regulation of the U.S. government, you cannot do anything much with the economy. We have very little industry left in the United States. It's been systematically destroyed, especially since the last 3 terms of presidency. We have been running a garbage pail. And therefore, we have no means, by ordinary means, to save the economy. We don't have jobs. Now, we could, as you know, most of you know, under NWAPA, we would create quickly 4 million or more jobs. Really, real jobs, really productive jobs. We would create at least immediately a couple million more highly skilled categories of jobs. We would start the process of a general recovery of the United States. But whoa, wait a minute, got one more problem. Where's the money going to come from that we're going to loan for NWAPA and loan for other high technology jobs and certain other kinds of skill jobs? The federal government is going to have to create credit, which will be run through a national banking system so that under national banking and federal government approval, we can conduit credit into creating these jobs. Let's take the practical question of the food supply in the United States right now. As you probably know, food is about to be canceled. And the Obama administration is doing everything possible to destroy it, because they're doing everything to destroy food for fuels. So therefore, what are we going to do? Well, what we're going to do is by giving the federal credit into, say, the NWAPA system, we're going to create a flow of credit into the various phases of this process, which will immediately charge the NWAPA in particular, and other things that go with NWAPA. We have the lost auto industry, the whole Detroit system, for example, and we're going to put that back into work. So we're going to create instantly, that is by federal decree, instantly create sufficient growth, not only to get rid of this hopeless debt, which never was really a legitimate debt at all, and we're going to we start the economy by taking people, when you have very few people who are actually involved in productive jobs. You're not employed in producing things. They're mostly employed in various kinds of services, which are not particularly productive and do not lend any productive value to the U.S. economy. They're simply pass-outs under one guise or the other. So under this case, we are launching a recovery of the U.S. economy by supplying the credit, as we did in the beginning of our development of our economy, after we won our revolution. We're going back to that system of recovery to get things moving. And it's going to start immediately. And the easy way for us to do this is NOAPA. NOAPA is a project which is relevant because it's focused on water management. And the problem we have in the United States today is a water management problem. In the central states, we don't have rain. We don't have the means to grow crops. We have people and we don't have people who are employed in actually productive forms of employment, physically productive forms of employment. The difference is that with this kind of reform of 3 steps, NOAPA as a driver, an incentive driver, which will save the organization of production in the central and western states of the United States. They're going back into the area of the so-called Detroit area with several million jobs immediately will have a similar effect, which means that we then can use a credit system managed under federal control, as we've used credit systems like Franklin Roosevelt did in the past, and use that kind of credit system under a Glass-Steagall type government system. And we can start the regrowth of the U.S. economy. We also have, as a byproduct of this, if we as the United States do this, you will find that the nations of Eurasia will join us. You will find that nations of Europe, who are now being destroyed by their own system, will now go back into functioning. And we will use international credit, which is an extension of the national banking concept, instead of speculation, in order to restart the economy. And that can be done. So there is a practical solution, a sane practical solution, as opposed to the other kind, for this problem we have as a nation. How far are we from getting it? Is the question. Well, that depends. Depends how desperate people are and how much their desperation is moderated by the sense of attachment to a solution. Our job is to present the solutions. You know, society is actually led, when it's led, by a tiny minority of the human race. We have not, because of our underdevelopment, we have not built up a nation systems which are actually rational and truly represent the will of human beings. What we approach is the conditional will of human beings by providing them with promises which we hopefully can keep, and that they will be satisfied by trusting us by the means of the measures we offer to them as suggestions. A very tiny minority of the human population in all nations actually has any comprehension, any qualifications for comprehension of how an economy runs or how it should be run. We have to bring them to us, to our ideas, our conceptions, based on the fact that they need precisely the solutions that we present. It may not be exactly what they would dream for, but it's what we could deliver. And if people understand that that's what the game is, they'll accept it, at least in large part. It's what they can believe that we can deliver. And it's our saying that we can deliver this, but we can't do that yet. And if you promise everything, they're not going to trust you. and for good reason. If you give specific promises that will work and make sense and can be explained to the people, it'll work. And if they don't accept it, that's their fault. But our responsibility, which is limited, we don't run the world. We don't have powers to supervise the world as a whole. We can only argue. We can only argue as an intelligentsia that we have done some thinking that the other people have not yet caught on to or didn't know about. And we can tell them what we can do, what we understand, what will work for them. And say, we're going to have to work harder and better in order to fulfill the kind of promises we wish to deliver. And say we need their cooperation in doing that. We've got to give them a sense that whatever we're promising them, we're committed to delivering. And that our promise of delivery has been made credible to them. And that experience, as in the case of the Franklin Roosevelt recovery in the United States during the 1930s, the same program, the same policy that Franklin Roosevelt used in reviving the U.S. economy. But we have to tell these guys, don't stop being the kind of idiot who believes in the party system. That's number one. Number two, don't believe in Obama. Get him out of there and make sure he's removed quickly. And we're going to have to figure out what we're going to do about this Republican. Because that's a real weak point there. So we're going to, however, I believe this. If we can establish a functional presidency of the United States, as was done in establishing the United States under George Washington's presidency, if we have a president and we use our system of government, our constitutional system of government, we can solve this problem. Not the way people would like it by wish factory or something, but by the fact we can point the direction. And it's up to the people to follow the direction and choose to follow the direction. But we must do what is not done right now. The problem with government now is that the U.S. government and its functions are chiefly one big damn lie. They promise things that do not exist or will not exist. And make rules which make no sense. And are willing to get into wars by which civilization of mankind as general could be destroyed. And we have to use that argument, and that bill of particulars as a method of convincing them this has to be done. And the key thing is this, to come back to the theme I started with, space. It's obvious. There's a limited time frame within which mankind can continue to live safely under the system of the sun, the current sun system. The sun has a limited, some people say 2 billion years. Some would say, well, long before 2 billion years, the sun is going to act up and life is going to be most unpleasant on this planet. So we as mankind have to address this question. And it's obvious that to address this question, we have to give new attention to space, the questions of space. We have to find ways of intervening in the space system, or the solar space system, and so forth. And this is possible. But we must turn to that direction to think, well, we can't stand around following a fixed recipe, like a kitchen cookbook recipe, forever. We have to anticipate the problems which face mankind in the future. We have to search for solutions to those problems. And we've got to convince people. And the big thing you have to do is this. Most people in the United States today behave stupidly. And this, of course, is helped by the educational system. It's helped by the terrible conditions of life of children, as well as adolescents. And there are many things that have to be done. And our job is, as a minority in society, and with other minorities in society, which wish to find and initiate true solutions for these problems. We have to get out there and convince people and educate them. And in particular, get them immediately to understand that these two presidencies that they've stuck out there for voting ain't shucks. And we've got to do something about that. And the best way is to go out and say that these guys aren't fit to run anything, and give some indications of what we're thinking. It can work. It can work because the situation of all humanity on this planet right now is almost a hopeless one. The war danger, the thermonuclear war, which is hanging over us right now, is threat number one. The shortage of food in the United States for people, citizens of the United States, is another. The conditions of health care are another. All of these conditions are intolerable. And nobody's doing a damn thing about it from the standpoint of government on down. I don't hear of any big riots coming out of the Congress against the lack of such needed reforms. They're going by the party system. And I think we have to just treat the party system as the kind of fraud that it has always been. We should have a system of representative government in which the citizens can use those other citizens who are the most qualified and the most committed to provide leadership, to provide the ideas and the leadership which is needed for the rest. If you can't be something, inspire it in somebody else. Thank you. Yeah. Okay.